And when I transferred to St. John's, I had so many credits stored up, I was able to finish my college degree program in a year and a half. So college was 3.5. I decided in those days, which was late 50s, to go immediately to law school at mid-year so that I could do it in 2.5 years and really get a job and get going. Unlike the present days when people seem to extend educations, I was compressing them. The law school at that time was in downtown Brooklyn on Skirmerhorn Street. And there I was met not only by one of my first wonderful mentors in the law, Dean Harold McNeese, but classmates who were, very, very special in my life and still are. One was the former police commissioner of the city of New York, Robert McGuire, very distinguished lawyer and public servant in New York. Another was Joe Hines, who's the district attorney of Brooklyn. We all ended up not only as friends and classmates, but lifelong friends and companions, including being in one another's wedding parties and being godparents to one another's children. So the law school experience for me from St. John's was also very, very enriching in a permanent way for all of my life until this very day.
What do you attribute that to? I mean, you take a bunch of guys from Brooklyn or Queens, and you get from them district attorneys, distinguished jurists, governors, police commissioners. Was there something in the water?
I doubt it. Maybe some of it is Brooklyn, although Bob McGuire came from the Bronx, he'd be quick to say, Throg's Neck. But we all came, I think, from families who were deeply committed to the education of their children and the values of their children and the sense of community and public service, as well as doing something that was good for your life in terms of a way of paying the bills, because classmates and people before me and after me also from St. John's went into the private sector to great successes. But that was a period when I think coming out of the World War II Depression era, the parents instilled in so many of us, that's the quality I think that you were searching for that I'm trying to put my finger on, which gave us a sense of tremendous purpose about ourselves growing as individuals, but being a part of a community, whether it was the St. John's alumni group or whether it was the neighborhood we came from or the larger community of the city of New York or state of New York, which was a great devotion to paying back, serving other people. Why else do you go to law school? I can remember the first time somebody asked me, why'd you go to law school? I said, well, I was going to be a priest and serve people. And I figured since I wasn't going to be a priest, so I'll go into a profession that serves people. And it's as simple as that as to why I became a lawyer. And all the rest of it in terms of private work or the academic part of my career, and certainly the largest portion of all, the public section of my career, was one of the most satisfying things, and some of it was serendipitous. It just kind of happened. It's not like I had a game plan to get to the Court of Appeals. Wonderful relationships, which you were just asking about, came together in concentric circles of relationships where people were coming to new positions of authority. And what do you do when you do that? You remember, well, somebody who influenced me or seemed like a good guy, and some of that goes back to the Mario Cuomo piece. I mean, he was in St. John's Law School 5 years before me, and I only knew him as a young student. I was on the Law Review, and one day Bob McGuire, who was the editor-in-chief, and I was the associate editor for articles, we got a manuscript from a fellow by the name of Mario Cuomo, who was practicing law on Court Street in Brooklyn, and he wanted to write about his 2 years as a clerk in the Court of Appeals to Judge Adrian Burke. We looked at the article, we said, this is interesting, we haven't seen anything like this, and we called him up and said, we're going to publish the article. And he said, what are you going to do with it? I said, well, we have to edit it and source check it and size check it. And he says, don't ruin my article. So to this day, he and I still, and some of the other members of the Law Review, tease about the fact that we really made him famous by publishing before anybody knew who he was. And he complains that we ruined his article by editing it. But that formed a relationship. It's lighthearted, but it's also very serious. And that relationship came to fruition Many years later, when I was, not that many years when you think about it, we were editing his article in 1960-61, and came 1974 with a lot of different alumni things and those kinds of relationships and encounters during those years. Came 1974, and another alum who came out of World War II, Hugh Carey, a congressman on the Ways and Means Committee, decided to run for governor of the state of New York. Nelson Rockefeller had left for Washington. Hugh Carey won as a Democrat, and he asked Mario Cuomo to leave private practice and become his Secretary of State. And we used to tease him that that job was not the one down under in Washington, it was the one that filed barbershop licenses and notary public authorizations, and he was a little concerned about that. I was asked at the same time to leave my faculty position, because by that time I had become a faculty member at St. John's University School of Law, as well as the Associate Dean for Academic Affairs. And the then Chief Judge of the Court of Appeals, Charles Brightel, invited me in that same time period, the end of 1974, to come up to the Court of Appeals as clerk and chief counsel to the court, a new role that he had envisioned. And my wife and I were very doubtful about doing that, because it meant I would have to move our 3 young children and our family to the Albany area for a full-time job, give up a lot of other things, and do this. And I can remember sitting in my faculty office one Saturday with adjunct Professor Mario Cuomo, and the two of us had a conversation much like the one we're having right now, asking, should we do this? Should we accept these respective invitations, one from the new chief executive and one from a relatively new chief judge? And we were very doubtful. He wrote me a note at the end of the day when he got home, which I had saved thanks to my wife. And it was a note that was dated, I think, December 21, 1974, in his own hand. Dear Joe, did it ever occur to you we're both making a big mistake going to Albany? Maybe we should just go into private practice. Mario. Fortunately, 1974, fast forward to 1987, he's now the governor, and he's appointing me as a judge of the Court of Appeals. The letter came out of my pocket with the new robe covering my jacket, sitting on the bench in the junior judge's seat on the far left by the window. They always give the window seat to the junior judge. And I read the letter as part of my remarks, having just been sworn in. And I said, obviously, Governor Cuomo's rhetorical question in 1974 has now found its answer. Neither one of us made a mistake. He's the governor and I'm a judge of the Court of Appeals. He loved it. I framed it, and it was in the entryway to my chambers the whole time I was on the Court of Appeals. A very special connection going back to the question you asked about St. John's, relationships, and how they mature into just wondrous opportunities.